Right then, everybody, we are now going to take a look at The Tattooist of Auschwitz. Hopefully I've said that right. And look at the content. How many of you have watched it? Oh yeah, we've got some people in the audience. That's good. Right, let's introduce the panel. Ross, over to you first.
Yeah, so my name is Ross McRae. I'm head of operations at Blazing Griffin Post-Production. Blazing Griffin was formed in 2016 with the merger of three companies: a video games development company, a film production company, and a post-production service provider. And we came together under one umbrella to continue to operate as the three distinct businesses in our sectors, but also to find the projects where we can work together, where we can develop and share IP across film, across video games, working on virtual production, which brings all three together in different ways. And yeah, in terms of Blazing Griffin post-production, we're based here in Glasgow, and we work across high-end TV drama, feature films, documentaries, entertainment. We've done things like Tattooist, BBC's Vigil, and a whole raft of projects. That's us.
Great. Joanne?
And I'm Joanne. I'm a post-production supervisor. I also work for Blazing Griffin, although Blazing Griffin hire me out to television drama productions to work on the production throughout the whole of their post process. So I will manage the budget, I'll oversee all the staffing and all the processes that come from, I don't know, you come back at the end of a shoot with a bunch of camera and sound files to delivering a finished master file to your broadcaster.
Excellent.
Hi, Taylor Reese. I'm the global head of strategic sales for Signiant. Signiant is a file transfer company enabling content exchange all over the world for companies like Blazing Griffin.
Great. And for those of you that haven't seen The Tattooist, we've got a short clip to play.
Mr. Sokolov,
Call me Lally.
you're looking for someone to write your life story.
So this is a love story.
Welcome to Auschwitz.
This is what it was every morning.
The new tattooist. I am now in charge of you.
Tattoo people. It's not something I can do. Every time I open my eyes, I am still there.
We have to find something in your mind. A good thing. You can't get in here.
I found something there. Someone.
Can you be here?
Thinking about that guy.
What guy?
We must keep living, whatever it takes. Love still exists. Even here.
Excellent. And having seen that trailer now a couple of times, I definitely need to watch it. So I'm going to work some time into that. Joanne, coming over to you first. Yeah. Can you describe the content flow from the production set to all of the different places it needed to go during the production phase?
Sure. I was actually just going to, I guess, do a little introduction to the actual production
You
first.
go for it.
But yeah, I'm doing that. So The Tattooist of Auschwitz was made by Synchronicity Films, who are a local company. They're based just across the river, I think that way. They specialise in book adaptations, and Blazing Griffin have worked with them on a few different productions. Most recently, Mayflies, which was for BBC Scotland a couple of years ago. So we have a established history of working with Synchronicity. So they asked us to come on board. They asked us to quote initially and then to come on board, which was fantastic for us, of course. So they optioned the book back in 2018. Heather Morris's novel, and went into prep about late 2022. We shot in various locations and studios in and around Bratislava in Slovakia from February 2023, last year, through to June. While we were shooting, we had an assembly editor who was based in Tel Aviv, which is where our director's from. They worked remotely through that period, assembling while the shoot was going on. After that, we brought on 2 more editors, both Scottish, who went out to Tel Aviv for the fine cut. We had 3 editors in total, 2 episodes each, and they were out there for 3 or 4 months. We actually finished the edit back in Glasgow remotely with our director in October last year. Then we had about 6 months of final post, picture and sound, all in Glasgow, and extensive VFX, which were done by 2 companies in London. We finished in April, so it's about 6 months of final post, and then the show went out on the 2nd of May. So it was quite a fast turnaround in the end.
Anything you wanted to add in there, Ross?
No, I mean, in terms of the kind of the content flow, we had DIT on set. We had a data lab in Bratislava that was local there, and stuff would go over to them. And then it was about using Signient to get material out to us back in Glasgow and out to Tel Aviv, and a dailies platform to make sure everyone is able to, as quickly as possible, see stuff and feedback.
Yeah, so our lab in Slovakia that we brought on, they would upload the proxies at the end of the day. They would also do an LTO copy of the high-res for us, and they would upload the proxies onto Frame.io so that our producers, director, execs could all be reviewing that day's shoot really promptly, either later that night or the following morning. The rushes, the proxies for editing were uploaded to by the lab into our offline space in Glasgow. Then the edit assistants in Tel Aviv would then download and prep the rushes for the editor. So we, at that point, had proxies in 3 locations.
What volume of media did you generate?
Quite a lot. Across the 4-month shoot, we had 150 terabytes of high-res, and we had about 10 terabytes of proxies. The high-res, though, was saved in 3 locations, so I think that makes it nearly half a
petabyte.
Petabyte in total.
And clearly you probably faced some challenges shooting in lots of different locations. Can you share some of those with us?
I mean, the shoot was great. So there was, in terms of the actual kind of staffing of it, we had a Slovakian service company that provided the crew. So that was all, from my point of view, that was all really smooth. We worked with the lab. Ross did a lot of work on the security protocols with the Slovakian lab.
Yeah, so I back in, that will have been the end of January 23, or maybe it was the very beginning of February, I flew out was I there for a week, I think, in the end? But basically covering the first however many days of shoot so that I could go and meet the DIT, see the setup on set, go to the lab, make sure we'd had many calls in advance, but just go and see their setup, see how they're going to do it, get to know them. But for us, I think being a post house in Scotland, it's not new to us working remotely, working with other people in different territories. Most of the time we're working with people in London. We've done many projects that are international, so that side of it wasn't new to us. The scale of it was bigger, but we're used to. We have the experience, and we have the kind of cloud tools and collaboration tools to be able to pull all of that together and make sure it runs smoothly.
And how did you address all of the different technical specifications? You were working with a number of broadcasters, Sky, NBC, Peacock. How did you address those challenges?
So we had 4 different vendors that we were delivering to, as you say, Sky, Peacock for streaming in the States, NBCU, who handled who handled reversioning for different territories, and also All3 Media, who had distribution in some other territories. So we had a lot of different specs. All of those people had 50-page specs,
Wow.
which had to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, my approach to it is you familiarise yourself with all the specs, you look at where the similarities are, you look at where the differences are, and then you enter negotiations to try and bring them as much in line as possible, because, you know, the back end of a project like this, everybody wants their files as soon as possible, and as much as we can align everyone, we would do that in order for, you know, ease and speed. But, you know, we started off with, I'm not sure how many files, but we got it down to 9 master files per episode. There could, at one point, have been double that. You know, we delivered to each vendor in both HDR and SDR. At one point, there was talk of seamless and part breaked, also in 2 color spaces, and
also differing part breaks.
Differing part breaks.
Some people
that's
wanted
right.
more part breaks and different timing of them. I think it's part of coming onto a project, you know, post coming in on a project during pre-production as early as possible, because it probably isn't an exaggeration to say if things had just been left to run their course, it probably would have been somewhere in the region of 18 deliverables for every single episode for all of those different vendors. By us sitting down and going through that, looking at the specs, negotiating alongside the production with those parties to say, look, you know, you want this, and it's like 95% the same as these people. Can you two just agree to do the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, with all of those conversations, we were able to chip it down. 9 deliverables per episode is still quite a lot. It's still, especially with the compressed schedule that we had, still a lot to get through and a lot to quality control, but it's a lot more manageable than 18, and that requires post-production expertise early on to be able to look at how to streamline all of those processes. And it's just going to happen more and more, because you rarely get things being commissioned by a broadcaster 100% fully financed. Back in the day, you'd make something for the BBC, and then there would be an international provider, maybe it's just BBC Studios and Distribution, and you would hand over to them afterwards, and you would deal with that later. Now the deals are being made more like feature films, where, yes, the BBC might greenlight something, but they'll only give a certain percentage of the funding. You need to pull in other parties. Tattooist being a prime example of having Sky, Peacock, and the 2 international vendors all there at the beginning, very beginning, making it happen, which means that they all feel quite rightly entitled to get it at the same time. But now, for the Post House, that's massively difficult to do, because you can't kind of make sure you nail one set of deliverables, get it all right, and then just start reversioning, and you've QC'd everything and you're happy and everyone else is happy. You're doing it all at the same time. And if you find out there's something wrong on the very last QC, you have to go
54.
back through every single one.
Challenging.
Yeah.
And how did you manage the creation and management of proxies for editing?
Okay, so the proxies were created on set by our DIT, which is just a really efficient way of doing it. So at the end of, every time the camera's finished with one card, that would go to the DIT. They will make their 2 high-res backups, and then they'll start generating the proxies for that card. It means that they're being generated throughout the day as you're shooting. So it's then that, because after you wrap, the DIT only has the last card to make the proxies for. Then that stuff can go off to the lab, and it can get up on Frame.io, get up on Media Shuttle, get to your editor and to your execs really quickly.
Okay. Taylor, I want to come to you.
Sure.
How does Blazing Griffin's experience with the Tattooist global production differ to or show similarities to what Signiant sees in the entire content creation media industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say we're seeing more of these types of global productions, right? They sent content to and from 5 different countries as a part of this. We're seeing more and more of that. On the whole, companies, production companies, studios, etc., are sending content much more internationally. That has gone up by nearly 50% in the last 5 years. More and more just content being generated. We talked about some of the size of the files and how much that needs to be sent on a daily basis. And we talked about some of the challenges. Like, one of the things for us, the big sort of key thing that we like to make sure we're helping with is that the challenge of getting the content where it needs to be so people can work on it should not be a difficulty. And so that's one of the things we're really focusing on, and we're seeing that we're able to help a lot of companies in similar situations. So it's very, very similar. Some of the other interesting things for us, being in a privileged position of also following that content throughout the rest of the ecosystem after they get it to their distribution partners, seeing them then send it to localization and doing some of the additional processes themselves to make sure it's then ready for consumption for the viewers. So that, to me, is really fascinating. We get to see a lot of just how intricate the whole process is from inception all the way through to viewership. So it's fantastic, and it is just very sort of cutting edge in terms of how they're doing that.
Yeah, and coming back to Joanne and Ross, Taylor talked a little bit there about content and all of the teams being able to access, but in the real world, how did the teams access everything, including post and VFX, and making sure that they were in touch with the most up-to-date and correct versions?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we had really big teams working across the world. Our composing team were in LA, and our VFX team were in London. We have to track all this stuff really carefully, because otherwise you get into a mess, and we don't want that. So in terms of VFX, we had 3 VFX editors in London. Only after we picture logged would they start pulling those shots. Everything gets logged into, we use Airtable as it's a cloud-based database. It's really great for these things. I don't know, you may all be using it as well. Why wouldn't you? So, every shot is given a code. It's entered into that database along with, a description, what the work to be done, number of frames, so everybody can see that. We also we use a dedicated media shuttle portal for the VFX, so I could access that, the DI team at Blazing Griffin could access that, the VFX editors would be able to access that, and our vendors as well. So we know we're all working from exactly the same shots, exactly the same media, and we're able to configure that portal so that our VFX vendor, one of our VFX vendors can see only the shots that they're working on, and the other one can see the shots that they're working on. They all have distribution lists of who has access to that material, and that's all able to be controlled through Signiant and controlled by our DI team here in Glasgow. So everyone's working from the same codes and the same media, and the way that process works is our VFX editors will create the initial pool. These shots will come up to Glasgow. They'll go into our DI team. We have the amazing Stephen Beavis, who handled all of the shots on this show, did an incredible job. He will relink back to the high-res media, and he will then create an EXR, which is high-res image sequence. I'm sure you know. This all exists on our system. He's then able to send the exact people on the distribution list at the correct facility a link to be able to access that media. The VFX teams, they work on their shots. They will send back work in progress versions at ProRes that we're able to access, that our team in London are able to access. And again, we have our Airtable database that we can cross-reference everything. Have we got the right number of frames? Is that shot correct? Is it at the right time code? Is it the right code? And that follows through all of the work in progress shots until we come to the finals, and they deliver back the XR finals into Glasgow on that same portal. So again, all the media exists in Glasgow, and people are feeding in and out of that, and that keeps us all right and all working from the same material.
Real. And Ross, we've heard, this huge project. Can you talk us through some of the technical challenges?
Yes. It was a big one for for my team. I think it kind of comes down to, it's been a fairly kind of fast but organic growth for us. We've not gone from nothing to doing a project of this size. We've been working up in terms of the scales of drama and film projects that we're taking on. For something like this, it kind of comes down to, in terms of technical challenges, it comes down to storage, both the speed, the amount of storage you have, and also the speed of it. It comes down to bandwidth and just needing more and more of that. It comes down to the security considerations, and then having the right tools, processes, software, cloud solutions to be able to work on a project of that scale, and across so many locations. On the media side, we're used to needing to deal with a lot of media. We work across multiple projects at the same time, but this project was just another step on top of that. So we had to expand overall the capacity of media storage that we had, but also with the size of this, and especially with the EXR workflow for VFX and just how much VFX there was in there, we needed to invest in dedicated NVMe SSD shared storage on a 100 gig bare network. We were on 40 gig, but incredibly fast SSD storage just for this project and one other that was happening at the same time that was also VFX heavy. That, if we hadn't had that, I don't think that we would have been able to get through it. Like, that was enabling real-time reviews.
EXR playback. We used LiveGrain on this, and that requires real-time. That's a real-time texturing tool that needs to be able to compute like 25 times a second, very complicated computation, and not fall over. So yeah, we needed the speed of network and that kind of speed of storage, and for it to be shared so that everyone's accessing the same thing, so you don't become siloed. Because it's relatively easy to have local SSD storage and be fast enough, but then you've got 6 people working from a different set of files that can just be
I was going to ask
be a riot.
about version control. How do you manage that? So, we've heard about Airtable.
Yeah. So version control. I think in the Final Post side we spoke about the handling of VFX on that front. In Final Post we make sure that we're on shared storage so that we don't have to deal with that. So we are throughout Final Picture Post, we're on DaVinci Resolve. On a shared database, we're all in the same project. You can go into collaborative mode and work on the same assets at the same time, and we have regular backups of that. So there isn't siloed working.
On the offline as well, we worked with sync boxes, which Salon Rentals provided, and I'm probably not the best person to explain how they work, but I'll give it a go. Because we had our editor, 3 editors in Tel Aviv. We supported them with 2 edit assistants here in Glasgow and 3 VFX editors in London. So they all needed to be working on the same media and have access to the same thing. So, through the shoot we talked about, we used Media Shuttle to make sure that the media was in all the locations. And we actually, when the London editorial team started up, we physically took a 10 terabyte drive to them, old school. And then for the fine cut, we moved on to Salon sync boxes. So there was a gateway box attached to the Nexus in Tel Aviv, and it was networked to 2 raids, one in Glasgow and one in London. The Salon, they remote in and they network all 3 together. So anytime there's a new piece of media, the other 2 are constantly searching, or all 3 of them are searching. And when a new, music track gets ingested in Tel Aviv, the other 2 notice that, and then that media is copied across the network. It's very clever, but it allowed the edit to be supported remotely here from Glasgow, and similarly for the VFX editors to all be working from the same thing. And I suppose it alleviated the need for us to have to worry about version control.
Yeah, no, that was very well explained.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of the tools that you used for dailies and assemblies, are you able to share what was used there and what some of the benefits were?
Yeah, sure. So, with dailies and assemblies, the biggest concern is always security. So we have Frame.io here at Blazing. We use that. We use it on most of our projects. The security's great. All of the, everything that was sent out was handled by the assistant editors, by the editorial team. They take control of that. Every file gets a watermark added, a do not duplicate added. We don't send out download enabled links unless we really have to, unless there's specific need that's come from somewhere. We have distribution lists that are adhered to, and if anybody is looking for something ad hoc to go to someone, we always stop and check before we do that. There's something else I was going to say, but it's slipped from my mind.
I think, I mean, and there was various tiers. Like if someone absolutely needed to download something at that point, that triggered the requirement for the watermark to be personalised to them, so that we know that exists, it's tracked, and also if it came out, we know where that came from. And we, as a facility, we use Frame.io Enterprise, and part of the enterprise part is the security considerations of it for the scale of projects we're working on. And whilst we didn't on this job, you can do dynamic watermarking, we can track IP addresses of where it's being watched, we can do all kinds of stuff like that, which is just, again, satisfying studios and production companies that their content, they would much prefer it if everyone had to stay inside one building at all times when working on it, but the reality is you can't do that. So the next best thing is they want to know everything is tracked, and that things are as locked down as possible.
Yeah, I've remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, go for it.
So when we were sending out our exec cuts, which we do on Frame.io, we have, Sky take a minimum of 4 exec reviews per episode. So there's lots of cuts flying about, and we were editing across all 6 episodes at once due to the time scale. So we use really careful naming conventions so that it's really clear exactly what version of what episode everyone's watching, and that's just in there as a structure. We decide it at the beginning, and we stick to it for everything that goes out.
And how did you handle those last-minute changes in the post-production phase?
With grace. Well, there's always last-minute changes, isn't there? There's always a VFX shot that doesn't come in when it's supposed to. Life would be boring if that if that happened all the time. One of the things with having this collaborative workflow or using Signian is that if something comes in late, if we have a late VFX shot, if we say to our VFX team, your deadline is, midnight on Tuesday, and midnight on Tuesday comes and we're 3 shots short for our grade on Wednesday, then, those shots will hopefully come in later on Wednesday, and because they're uploading directly into our servers, we can deal with them straight away. They go into our DI, they can be turned around really quickly, they can cut into the finishing timeline, and the colours can pick them up, and they're there. We've got everyone in the room.
Yeah, I think again, it's all about the tools you choose. Like in terms of our team in mastering, as we mentioned earlier, you can go through 50 files and then discover on the QC of the 51st that there was an issue that, it happens, no one else spotted it. It's easy to miss, but now we know it's there. We have to go back and fix it for everything. If you had to remaster all of those files from scratch, they wouldn't have been on telly. So we use MTI Cortex, which is a finishing mastering tool from MTI Film in LA, and that allows us to do drop-ins to ProRes files, more like an old tape workflow of just go to that point and just rewrite the ones and zeros just for that moment each change. And it's a relatively simple thing. It's not anything, massively new, but I have no idea how many of those we did. We did a lot of those. Yeah. And that allowed us to, for the most part, go back in and spot check QC rather than do a full QC. You've not touched the sound at all if you're just doing a picture change. So again, it's those tools that, let you get through this volume of work within the limited time that you have.
And was this project different to anything else you've ever done before?
Only in terms of the scale and the budget and the, number of execs. But, we're used to working in high-end drama, so it was a slight step up, but a lot of these processes and procedures, we've been implementing at Blazing Griffin for years, so it was, I suppose, for us, the next logical step.
Yeah. I think, we were I would say we were refining the workflow as we went along, and there were definitely things there were things on the last biggest job that we did that we went, oh, if this was another level up, we would need this, and that. We would need to configure the team a little bit differently. We then employed some of that in the course of this one, and we learned some more things. So we're ready to approach the next one with some of those lessons learned, and then we'll learn some more lessons, because that's just how it works.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Now, Taylor, let's have a look at the numbers, if we can, with you.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I think we've touched on the just sheer volume of content across the production. One of the things that's obviously important for us, when we're talking about a shortened time frame, is that we are quick in terms of how we get the content to and from where it needs to go. Certainly, too, I think it's not captured on here, but yeah, it is. Sorry, but the total number of users on the VFX portal. So 50 is quite a decent amount, clearly, working on one project. But the nice thing about that is that they were able to create a portal specifically for VFX, specifically for this project, that allowed them, obviously, the speed that we talked about, but as Ross touched on, security being a really key point in terms of what the studios want to see. Obviously, just from a chain of command perspective, the visibility in sort of granular detail into who has touched what content, where they've sent it to, and when, having that at your fingertips, I think that's really important. And then, these projects are obviously not permanent, so when you're done with a project, using your identity access management tool to spin up and spin down, that sort of thing, I think just highlights the flexibility of the solution that we've provided for Blazing Griffin. It is just quite a lot of content, I think, is the important thing. I think we've already touched on the numbers, so I will leave it at that. But it was a great for us to be a limited part, obviously, but be a part of such a moving production and really a cool story. So
yeah, no, super cool story. Thank you for telling it, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.